Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. Nottingham Forest can go fifth in the Premier League with a win at Leicester City tomorrow night. We'll discuss team selection and the C. Cooper factor, plus the reasons for bans for Evangelos Marinakis, Nuno Espirito Santo, and Morgan Gibbs-White in the company of. And at this point, I was going to read out three names, none of whom are here at the moment. The absolute tour de force, or tour de farce, I should say, of this podcast this morning. So Emily Anderson was going to be here, but poor little Freddie, her dog, has been taken ill. So no Emily. Michael Temple will join us, hopefully, but he's running a bit late as real life and his work gets in the way, which is all fine. Greg Mitchell went out for one beer last night and is now trapped in the Bolivian jungle in a haze trying to find his way home, or he's coming back from a day trip to Chester or something like that. So stepping into the breach heroically is Pete Blackburn. Pete, how are you this morning?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, nothing quite like the raw thrill of a adrenaline-fueled last-minute call-up to starting lineup. So pleased to be here.
Good. Yes, you are indeed a lifesaver. It was a last-minute call. So, yeah, people in the comments have noticed that it's just Pete holding it all together. Thank you. You are correct, James. So, we'll talk about the Leicester game first, and then we'll get on to the grim business of bans and all that kind of stuff, and box that off, and hopefully move on. But we will discuss it. Leicester City away, Pete. And also there's no milk in the house. So I've got a black tea to drink. That is miserable.
Oh, no. It's grim.
Terrible. How are you feeling about Leicester City away, Pete?
Really excited. I mean, while this is a sort of, a local derby, albeit I guess a lesser one for us, and there's this narrative around us facing Cooper for the first time, I feel like the win against Palace has taken a bit of the edge off the pressure and the noise that could have been surrounding the game, with it being such a big week for us, and should hopefully allow us to go to the King Power without any sort of great feeling of fear or apprehension or sort of desperation for points and such like. And frankly, hopefully those are the circumstances for a bit of revenge after what happened last time we went there. Things are very different now. Things are looking pretty good for us at Forest, and I'm pretty confident that we can go there and get the points.
Cooper's kind of the elephant in the room a little bit. I think it's a bit overblown, really, myself. But there was a lot of chat on Twitter last night about how Forest fans should react to him. Will he wave back? Will he acknowledge them? I mean, you'll be in the away end. Would you want people to chant for Cooper, or would we just completely ignore him and just cheer on Nuno and the players?
It's no surprise to anyone that I was a real big old Steve Cooper fan. There was a real sort of love there, and I'll never forget what he did for us and everything that we achieved together. It's not ideal that he's at a rival club, but these things happen in football, isn't it? It's a pretty small world. So, as far as I'm concerned, I've sort of put it all in a box now. I'm not going to be going into the game with Steve Cooper dominating my thoughts whatsoever. I don't really know what to expect from the general reception, but if there's a moment for sort of polite, dignified applause, I'll be happy to give that. Otherwise, I think it's one just to focus on us. In an ideal world, perhaps we'll be a few goals up come the closing stages of the game, and we can inform the Leicester fans that he's not a big fan of theirs or Derby, and that'll be a nice moment for all of us. But otherwise, I personally won't be focusing on him. I'll just be focusing on Forest.
Yeah, I would be the same. I mean, if I was Cooper, I'd ignore the Forest fans, to be honest, because it's in his job interest to do that. Maybe at the end, give him a little wave or something, but that's irrelevant, to be honest. I kind of hope the away end don't cheer for him. I think, Nuno's the manager now and all that. Much as I love Cooper, I think the only thing I would chant was I'm seeing this from Twitter. I saw Shane on Forest tweet this. If we're 2 or 3-0 up, I'd chant Cooper, give us a wave, just to wind the Leicester fans up. I think that's all I do, to be honest. But yeah, focus on winning the game, and Nuno's doing a really good job, and I hope fans chant for Nuno much more than Cooper. Before we get into lineups, just in general, the approach to the game, we can be not conservative away, but we can be pragmatic. Leicester are kind of going to be pragmatic, I imagine, as well. How would you like to see us go about the match in general?
I got to say, I think it's a really interesting one. I mean, some of this is going to be the broad analysis of a man who was not expecting to do this podcast, I imagine. But I think it's an interesting one because from what I saw of Leicester and the Leicester Southampton game, they looked a much better team when they really sort of became a bit more positive, showed a bit more intent. I think they brought Fatawu on off the bench. I probably absolutely butchered that pronunciation, and that's brought a real sort of intent about them. I just wonder whether they might come to the conclusion that their sort of best hope is to be a little bit more positive than you might expect from the sort of Premier League Steve Cooper. If that happens, then I think that'd be massively in our favour, because we know what we can do. We're I think the third best in the league for XG against, second best in actual output, and also I think I'm right in saying that Leicester have conceded the first goal in their games on 6 out of 8 games this season. If that happens again, you'd fancy us to sit deep and thwart them for the rest of the game. So I think that would suit us. If you're right and they're a bit more pragmatic, then I think it's more difficult for us, and the onus will be on us to try and create in the way that it was against Palace, I suppose, and it has been at home for us to try and develop a bit of that ability to dominate games and to work out a way to break the opposition down. I think the really encouraging thing about it, if that is the case, is that Elliot Anderson showed us on Monday night that he can be a player who can really unlock doors, and he can really help us to create those chances. There were some stats knocking around about Anderson's contribution to the game on Monday night. I think he's only the third player in the Premier League this season to complete 6 dribbles and create 5 chances in one game. And I remember people in the post-match talk having a big debate about Anderson and Gibbs-White, and I think his performance merits us having some of those conversations now. So I think Forest have shown in that game that we can step it up and be the team that try and take a little bit more of the impetus in the game and try and create. And hopefully, if that ends up being the case, then we'll be able to do that. I think we've got an adaptable team, adaptable squad. I think having the options that we've got now means that we should be able to change the way that we play, and that we're not just a one-trick pony as we perhaps have been in the Premier League thus far. So I'm pretty hopeful that we can work out the best way to go in the game, depending on how they play, perhaps, and take advantage of the situation regardless.
I should say good morning, by the way, to everyone who's watching and with us in the live chat. Do hit like on the video if you haven't already. Just going back to Cooper very briefly, Lee asked, has anyone heard his post-match stuff? It was asked about it. I spoke to Jordan Blackwell, who I used to work with today for the Leicester opposition preview, who was in the press conference, and he said almost every question was about Cooper and Forest.
Yeah.
And which I think is a bit silly, really. And he straight batted all of them and didn't offer any particular praise to us or anything. Which, again, I'm not particularly bothered about. He could have offered some warm words, but I can see why he wouldn't. So, interestingly, Jordan.
Sorry,
go on, Pete.
I was just going to say, I listened to about half of his press conference yesterday, and you're absolutely right. There was an awful lot of asking him questions about Forest, and his line really was, we dealt with this in the summer. We had these long chats. I gave you time, as Steve Cooper tends to do, to let you have your sort of your journalistic narratives and such like. And I sort of I went with that a bit, but it's just focusing on Leicester now, and totally understandable. I mean, there were obviously questions dangled at him as well, trying to get him to have a little snipe at the owners, given what's happened this week, and he sidestepped all that stuff pretty professionally. So I think he'll be focused and not thinking about us too much at all.
Yeah, he often says when he doesn't like a question, "I respect the question, but," and that means I'm going to completely ignore it. That's his tactic.
With all due respect, which is no.
Yeah. With all due respect, I've got no respect for you. It's always that. Yeah, I respect the question, and I can see why you're asking it, but I'm now going to not answer that question. So there's that. And interestingly, on the football side of it, I asked Jordan about how Leicester would go about it, and he said they don't really. He says they're trying to find a balance between Maresca's possession style and Cooper's counter-attacking style, and he thinks they're a bit caught between two schools at the moment. So he doesn't know how they'll go about it particularly, which is interesting because it means it's kind of slightly trickier to prepare for them. But again, I always hope the focus is on us, and I hope we're positive and sort of get after them in a way and play with wingers. We'll get onto our lineups actually, and I'll go through Temps's as well. I'll leave it till last if he doesn't join us. Emily's team was Pete's team, so just bear with me 1 second, and I'll put that up and I'll read it out for people who are listening, not watching. There we go. It's unchanged basically, but just as a reminder, Sales, Aina, Milenkovic, Murillo, Moreno, Yates and Dominguez in midfield, Elanga, Anderson, Hudson-Odoi, and Wood up front. Is that your team, Pete, as well then?
I think loosely, yeah. I mean, I think one of the nice things about the situation that we're in now, with having had a good start and having quite a sort of stable situation at the football club and some good strength in depth, even with the injuries and suspensions and what have you, is that there's a few changes we can make to this team, and that you will in yours, and that Temps will in his. And I'm not concerned about any of them. I think they all have sort of good merit and make sense for different reasons. I mean, I think there's a few reasons why I've sort of plugged for this team. I think the first one is that I think it's really hard to have a good sense of what change might be realistic in such a short turnaround. It's very hard to know what the conditioning of the players is going to be, exactly what sort of injury doubts we might have, if indeed there are any. So, I mean, I think if I was Nuno, I'd be heavily considering freshness as a part of it, and that might mean that this lineup changed. But given that I don't have access to that sort of information, Unchanged makes sense to me for a lot of reasons. I think it's nice going into a game where our preferred formation is likely the same as theirs, and ultimately when I line them up, I think we're probably stronger in pretty much every single position, which is a nice place to be. I think maybe the only one, as things stand form-wise, that you'd be confident about swapping would perhaps be Buonanotte in for Elanga, given how he's going about things so far this season. So, yeah, Unchanged for me, because I think it's a reward for generally decent to very good performances on Monday night, which is, that's obviously a nice place to be. And then it's a bit of a arm around the shoulder for perhaps the players who had quieter games, which I guess is largely the wide men, who I just think have such a huge role to play for us this season, and need to be sort of supported and backed into being their absolute best. And I just think having them both there really must be a problem for the opposition to have to think about and adapt the way they play and pin those fullbacks, and just give them plenty to be worried about. So for me, I'm sticking in that sense. I think also you match our central midfield three up against what's likely to be theirs, and I think the energy and the dynamism of what we've got could really dominate what they're offering. To be honest, I think they could look quite pedestrian compared to the energy of Yates, Dominguez, and Anderson, who worked really nicely together as the game developed on Monday night. So for me, I think that we stick how it is. I'm certainly not tempted to move Anderson out of that 10 role. As I said, his stats were unreal on Monday night, and obviously that was pretty clear on the eye test as well, because he was at the heart of just everything good that happened, really. So there's no desperate need for change as far as I see it, unless freshness is the answer. And ultimately, I'm not really desperately concerned with any of their threats. I think they have talented wide men, but I'm not concerned enough that we need to bring another player like a Dominguez or an Anderson into those wide roles to help with defending against those. Moreno and Aino have shown already that they're a match for much stronger opposition. So it's about us for me. And that's why I'm unchanged. But as I say, there are options on that bench that I wouldn't be upset about, and the ones that you're going to talk about.
James in the chat, by the way, asks who the ref is. I just had a quick look, and it's Craig Pawson, an inoffensive name. I can't remember him being awful or good. I don't know. So yeah, it's Craig Pawson anyway. So there you go. Morgan Gibbs-White is interesting. People are saying, is Morgan definitely out? Is he still crocked? Just on that, Nuno was asked about it in his press conference, and he said along the lines of, it's a day-by-day process. We'll keep assessing him. He's improving. Chat like that to me makes me think that he's not available for this one, and it doesn't even make me overly hopeful he'll be available for West Ham if it's still a day-by-day thing. But we'll cross that bridge when they come to it. Are you picking that team, Pete, with the assumption that Morgan's unavailable, or even if he is available, you're still unchanged?
I'm picking the team with the assumption that he's not going to be anywhere near his sort of full fitness, and that we don't need to rush him if he's whatever percentage fit at this point. I think we're in a position where we've got options there, and Anderson has proven his ability to step into his shoes, that we just don't need to make that decision right now. So it's not a rush. I don't want us to do anything that means that Morgan might, end up having a recurrence of an injury or exacerbating things. And we've seen before with players what that can end up doing, like it did with Taiwo last season. The impact can be pretty severe potentially. We're not in that sort of desperation. I don't think we need to do it. if Morgan Gibbs-White is 100% fit and we're just seeing a load of sort of game playing as we have done in the past with injuries, albeit less so under this manager, then I think you have to find space for him in your team because he's too good not to be there. But I don't think that's where we are right now. I think it's very unlikely that he's 100% fit or even that close to 100% fit, and we just don't need to rush him.
My stance would be the same. If Morgan was, 80% fit, could do a job, then I would just leave him on the bench. And I'm fine with that. If he was 100% fit, totally trained for days, ready to go, then I think I probably would bring him in because he's such a key player. But otherwise, I wouldn't. Out of curiosity, would say he is say it's West Ham when maybe we're having this conversation next week. There's lots of caveats around that. Or let's just say let's say he is 100% fit and he's ready to go and he's in your team. Where is he in your team? Which position?
So I think Gibbs-White plays 10 for us, and depending on the game, Anderson either slots into the central roles or you play him in one of the wide roles, depending on the opposition. For now, I mean it's ultimately a bit harsh given I think he wants to play in that role and he's shown what he can do there. But I don't think we should forget that Gibbs-White has also shown what he can do there over a long period of time, even if sometimes people find him frustrating. And I think that we need both of them in our starting lineup. They're two of the first names on the team sheet for me. I mean, I think there's also a case in future games, perhaps not in the ones immediately coming up, for us to play the sort of 3-4-2-1 system that we did a bit towards the end of the first season under Cooper and have done sort of sporadically during our time. I think it would give us a lot in terms of having real sense of control in the midfield with four players in there, and Anderson and Gibbs-White combining as two sort of 10s is a bit of a vibe for me. That I think it's a sort of an itch that I'd like to scratch at some point. And I think there are games when that would be really useful for us. So I think there's options there, and I don't think we need to look at our football team as, right, this is our lineup, this is our 11, this is what it's got to be, because there's always going to have to be flexibility. It's very rare that we're going to have, well, it's not perhaps necessarily rare, very rare, but it's not necessarily that likely that we're going to have that set of players always available, and you're going to have problems to contend with in each match, because we so often have players that we play against that we need to make a plan for, and Anderson's often one of our best plans for that, because he can do so much for us in wider roles, in bringing that work rate and energy and discipline, while also trying to create and link up. And I think it's one to work on is the relationship between Gibbs-White and Anderson, because if they can really hit it off, I think it could be pretty magical. Just one more thing before I shut up. I forgot to mention when I was looking through the team, I think the one big change, and I should say that I've remembered because Danscape put it in the comments, but the one big change that I was really torn over was James Ward-Prowse, because as Danscape said in the comments, it may well be a game for cool heads. And he's sort of the epitome of that, isn't he? Just by a slightly less than perhaps cool-headed moment in some people's viewpoints last time out. But yeah, I do wonder whether there's a real case for that, and I guess we'll talk about that in the coming team lineups.
Yeah, I think so. We'll come on to that, certainly. Someone in the chat, I can't remember who it is, forgive me, said obviously Ward-Prowse can't play against West Ham. So maybe you don't want to run Dominguez into the ground necessarily. Maybe it is a game for Ward-Prowse. I can see, can see some sense in that. For me, I'm quite interested in this 2 number 10s thing in some of the away games. Certainly, I think I could see us go into away games and play that box midfield with Yates and Dominguez, or whoever behind Anderson and Gibbs-White, behind Chris Wood. I'm also quite interested in seeing Morgan play as an 8, as one of a 2 in midfield, because I think he can do it. And I like Anderson as a number 10, but I don't want to fall into recency bias terribly, because Morgan has done a really good job for us as a number 10. He's been the talisman of the attack for so long. I just think there's room for Anderson and Gibbs-White to play. I think they have to play, because one of my worries about the team, Pete, is, and I think James Perch pointed this out on Radio Nottingham, who's going to score all the goals that get us to where we want to be? Because it can't be Chris Wood every week. Hudson-Odoi probably will get you 5 over a season, but you need you need Elliot Anderson to start. I'm a huge fan of Elliot Anderson. This could sound like a dick. Eventually, he needs to put goals and assists up, and Morgan needs to put goals and assists up. And it would be nice to get a couple from the defence as well, and a couple from Ryan Yates. But we haven't really seen that this season, so it feels like we need a more collective production of goals, really.
Well, in Anderson's defence, it wouldn't have been unreasonable if he'd have come away from that game on Monday night with a hat-trick of assists, given some of the goals he was putting in. So, we always have to be wary of that sort of outcome bias with things. I think the same applied for Gibbs-White for lots of last season as well, to be honest. There were quite a few moments where he probably would have had another notch in his tallies if other players had been a bit more impressive with the finish or whatever. I think I didn't hear that interview with James Perch, but it's clearly not an unreasonable point. At the moment, we're relying on winning games by 1-goal margins or drawing them, and we're not really getting goals from across the pitch like we would like to. I think it's fair to say, in my opinion, both the wingers probably haven't hit the heights that we hope that they will do this season so far. They've had moments. They obviously combined for a brilliant moment against Liverpool, but I think both of them have potential to bring more goals. We've seen that they can both do that in big runs. Elanga had a few months of being a massive goal threat, and Hudson-Odoi obviously did towards the end of last season as well. So hopefully both of those can offer more. I think you're right about Anderson and Gibbs-White both should be able to offer more in terms of goal threat. I think I'm not desperately sold on the moving Gibbs-White back thing. I think if we were playing a three in midfield, I think it'd be a different case for me. But when you're playing that deeper two, we talk about them as a sort of 6 and an 8 on here sometimes. But that 8 is being asked to do an awful lot of disciplined defensive work and not so much box crashing and all that sort of stuff. Like, I think in a sort of dream world, if I was on Football Manager, I'd probably be looking at recruiting an absolute monster 6 for Forest. The sort of player that perhaps Forest thought they were getting with Sangare, but I'm not convinced necessarily whether he is that profile of player, let alone the sort of form side of things. And if you had that, you could probably play Gibbs-White and Anderson as sort of freewheeling attacking 8s, as we've often seen in the Premier League in the last few years, because you've got that security. But at the moment, we're trying to sort of find a balance between the players, and that's probably part of the awkwardness in terms of getting the goal threat, because obviously if players are box crashing and such like, then we're vulnerable if we haven't got someone sweeping up. So for me, I think Anderson's shown the profile that he can thrive as an 8, and Gibbs-White has shown that he can do it at a 10. The sample size for each of them doing it in the opposite way around is a lot smaller, and therefore I don't think it needs messing around with at this point. But come January, or more likely perhaps come the summer, I think there's probably work that could be done if they both remain at the football club to unleash them a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I am curious to see Morgan in that deeper role. I think he can do it. Like, I remember, was it Bournemouth at home? It might have been last season where him and Yates ended up as a midfield too. And I thought Morgan was really good.
We played a sort of 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1, didn't we? And there was just 2 of them covering that whole area. And Gibbs-White did do it with real discipline. And of course he can do it because he's a really talented player. And we know that that the sort of off the ball side of the game, the out of the possession side of the game, isn't a weakness for him. His work rate's enormous. He can track a man. He can do a job in a man-on-man situation. He does all that side of the game. But you have to be cognizant, I think, that if you ask someone to do that side of the game, then you're going to take away their ability to do other parts of the game. And I don't want to do that with Morgan if I don't have to. I want to give him as much of a platform to do the other sides of the game, the attacking, the creativity that I can, while also accepting that it's a brilliant addition to that he can do so much of the dirty work as well. And I think him and Anderson are the same in that respect. And that's sort of what I'm getting at with if we could find a way to play them both there with a big old destroyer unit behind them, then I think that could be pretty special. But it's going to take a big recruit to get us there, I think, because you'd be asking an awful lot of Yates or Sangare, who it's just not a job that they've really, really done.
I think the good thing is as well, like, we're having this conversation from such a position of strength. Like, we've got really strong quality midfielders. The first season we came up, it obviously felt a bit thrown together, and there were players who were either doing the same job or totally different jobs. Freuler and Kouyaté were probably playing out of position to an extent, and stuff like that. But now it's great. We've got Ward-Prowse, we've got Dominguez you can drop in there. Obviously Yates, Danilo and Sangari's come back, and we're debating whether to play Morgan as an 8 or a 10. And also I think Morgan would want to play as a 10, and I'd like him to stay at the football club for as long as possible. So if that's a thing, then let's do that. Temps is in the chat. I can see he has landed. Just before I add him in, just a reminder that if you're not at the game, like Pete and Temps, I think as well, you can watch it at the Trent Navigation on 2 big screens outdoors. There's also discounted beers, chippy tea till 9 p.m. at £8.50, and you can get barbecue and pizza outside as well. So fill yourself up, enjoy the game at the Trent Navigation. Right, let's add Temps in. Morning, Michael Temple.
Morning, mate. I am at the game, and last time I was at the Walker's Bowl, or whatever they call it these days, I'd barely passed my test, and my Peugeot 106 broke down 2 miles from the ground. I had to walk it. So hopefully this is a slicker ride.
Let's go to your team then, because we've gone through Pete's. I'll put it in and just read it out as per normal, and Temps can talk us through it. So we have got Sells in goal, same back four: Aina, Milenkovic, Murillo, and Moreno. Ward-Prowse comes into midfield with Yates. Then you've got Dominguez playing as that sort of wide right role, but you can talk around that. Anderson as a 10, Hudson-Odoi, and Chris Wood up front. Just talk us through your thinking, and then we'll bounce some names around.
I'm sure Pete's echoed what I'll say about the back five, but it's so impressive. We just have to stick with that for consistency. I think tactically, Nuno's unlikely to pick both wingers, and there's no fault in Anthony Elanga being dropped from my 11 here. I think we've seen that he likes that finisher concept, someone that can come on last 25-20, change the game if we need to, but it feels a bit gung-ho to Nuno's style to play Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi away from home. Ward-Prowse comes in for me because of his availability and that extra poise in central midfield. And Dominguez gets that slot in a very different role to Anthony Elanga, leading the press, harrying, and just defending from the front. So that's the thinking behind my side. I don't need to speak to Chris Wood, who scored 20 goals in 50 appearances and just continues to defy my original review and one or two others as well. So that's my side. And I am, of course, speculating that Morgan Gibbs-White is going to have a period on the sidelines.
Just on Morgan quickly, we just discussed it at great length actually before you joined us. But just out of curiosity, if Morgan was 80% fit, would you start him? If he was 100% fit, would you start him?
If he was 100% fit, yeah, of course, I'd start Morgan Gibbs-White. He's the guy we're trying to build a side around. I just don't think he is. He's in a course of treatment which requires non-weight bearing on that ankle. I just wonder if it's slightly more serious than is being let on. Obviously, I've got no inside information other than see him limping for his coffee in West Bridgford every now and again. But it's for me unlikely that he plays, and even less likely that he starts. But I think we're in a position of more strength with the return of James Ward-Prowse, and I'm sure that will alter the role slightly of Elliot Anderson.
Any shout for Nico Williams? There's a person in the chat saying, feel a bit for Nico. He's doing well off the bench. Williams and Moreno on the left in this case. I'll put that on the screen actually, instead of Callum, which would contain Fatawu, who was very good against Southampton by all accounts. Thoughts on Williams, Temps?
I think he's in this battle, isn't he, with these two fullbacks, and he profiles similarly with them, and that he is very competent in an attacking sense. I think Alex Marino's review at Villa was, if he's fit, play him, because he just offers so much. That little bit more. No, that's unfair. I was going to say more composure and defensive understanding than Nico, but I think that's unfair. They profile slightly differently. Olorena is an automatic pick. I think he's a revelation. Well, Elliot Anderson was given man of the match on Monday night. Olorena and Matt Sells were ahead of him from where I was sat. Nico can consider himself unlucky. Hasn't done too much wrong. Makes an impact from the bench, but for me, these are our first pick fullbacks this moment in time.
We'll go to my team, and then we'll get the chaps' take on that as well. So my team, these are all very similar, obviously, because we're coming off the back of a nice win. Same back five, as you know. Yates and Dominguez still in midfield. One change, Jota in for Elanga, Anderson, Hudson-Odoi, and Chris Wood. I feel like I said after the post-match show, Jota's earned a start, and I do kind of stick to that. And more so, like Elanga, I don't think Elanga's playing terribly. I know people are saying like he's looking really bad. I just think Jota's looking really good off the bench, and has probably earned an opportunity. I'm really interested to see him starting a game, and if his kind of crash bang burst balloon, as Kelvin said, energy, if that works, starting a match. So I think he's earned an opportunity, and I'd like to see how he does. And also on Elanga, I wonder if he benefits coming off the bench against teams that are probably going to sit in, as Leicester are. I think he's found it a little more tricky in these games where he hasn't had lots of room to work with and lots of room to run into. I think he comes inside quite a lot. The link with Aina wasn't quite on it in the first half against Palace. So I would give Jota a chance. I do, though, like the Dominguez playing as a wider role and seeing how that works. Because Leicester, again, I'm a bit of a spoiler from the opposition preview, they'll bomb one of their fullbacks on and one will sit. And Dominguez can play on the side where one bombs on and just contain that attacking area and let Hudson-Odoi be the one that attacks. So I see merit in that. And I also see merit in, give Dominguez an hour and then bring Ward-Prowse on, or start with Ward-Prowse and then get Dominguez on for energy. So it feels like we're in a really good place with better options off the bench now.
Just give you the challenge that you'd probably throw to me and Pete. So this is a team which I think a lot of the support would pick. But looking through the Nuno lens, do you think he would? Do you think he'd go this attacking out wide away from home? Is this a Nuno prediction or an MD11?
It's an MD11. But actually, if we think of what was the team at Brighton away, I think both wingers started at Brighton away. That was to exploit a high line, though. And I wonder if Nuno won't do it. And also, I do like backing players to play themselves back into form. I remember when Brennan was playing badly, and I relentlessly said pick Brennan all the time, and got some stick for it. And Elanga, like I say, I don't think he's playing badly. I think he's just a constant 6 out of 10, and I quite like that Nuno's backing him. When he's playing wingers, I know he doesn't always do it, but it's always Elanga who starts over Jota. And I think if he does play wingers, it will probably be Elanga who starts. And I don't think Jota will start, but I would quite like to see it in this one. What about you, Pete? Thoughts on that?
I mean, I personally wouldn't have any great issue with it. I think you might have summed up where I'm at with Elanga. I think I start to feel quite protective of players when the narrative turns against them, and I think where we're at the moment is that things are going pretty swimmingly, and therefore the sort of the narratives where we have to look for a little bit of a change because it's something to talk about or something to improve on or whatever can be a little bit harsh sometimes. I sort of want to put an arm around Elanga and keep trying to get him back to his best, because if we can get him to the Elanga of that sort of spell, the first half of last season, then he's just a huge weapon. I don't actually believe that he's a player who can only thrive against a high line. I think we see in moments that his delivery is improving markedly. He whipped a beautiful ball across the box that had Dean Henderson all over the shop against Palace. You see from his corners that he's got that skill now, that perhaps it didn't seem like he had in quite the same way when he first came here. I just think there's plenty to work with there, and I'm in no rush to bring in the shiny new thing that admittedly has been very impressive off the bench, but will continue to be very impressive off the bench. As Mark said it on the post-match stream on Monday night, Jota Silva gives you brilliant options in that he can be an attribute if we need to shut up shop because of that unbelievable work rate and energy and press and all that sort of stuff. Or he can be a bit of a game breaker for us because he introduces chaos and he gets shots off where a lot of our players just don't seem to do that. Often he comes off the bench and has a bit of a long ranger and creates an opportunity or a moment. I'm just not convinced that the change is needed if you're going to play a winger. And really, more what I'd be looking at is what the balance is going to be and whether we consider that we need someone who's going to do a job for us out wide, like a Dominguez or an Anderson at this point. So for me, I'm happy with the situation of Elanga being that first choice right winger and Jota coming on to change the game for us. But if we need somebody, or Nuno feels he needs somebody, I mean, I wonder if it'd be on the other side to Temps's team, because I'm guessing I've not seen an awful lot of Leicester, but I'm guessing Justin is the one who'd be bombing on from right back. So you'd be looking at moving Hudson-Odoi potentially as well. So there's a lot of considerations with that, and I think I just focus on what we are, to be honest.
Who's taking your corners, Max? Like Gibbs-White and Ward-Prowse, obviously deadly delivery, but how impressive were Anthony Elanga's efforts on Monday night? Every single one was on the money, side foot with pace, vicious whip. Really, really impressive how consistent he was with that delivery.
Well, yeah, I mean, Anderson can be a bit hit and miss, but we have scored from Anderson dead balls. So it would probably be Anderson, and Hudson-Odoi takes a decent corner. But you do make the point I was going to make about if Ward-Prowse isn't playing, then Elanga is our next best corner taker, I think I would say. Just on what Pete said, it's been James Justin who bombs on in the most recent games, and it was Christensen at the start of the season, but it's become Justin. So if that affects the wingers, I'm not sure. Just really quickly before we move on to the band stuff, and Pete's got to go at 12 as well. I touched on this very briefly on Monday, but a lot of fans getting giddy about Brie Samba being in the stands and Lewis Grabban posting, pictures with him or with the eyes emoji and stuff like that, and a few speculating that he's coming back in January. Just quickly, each of you, would you want Brees back in January? Again, there's a lot of recency bias around Matt Sells' performance, but Pete, would you welcome back Brie Samba if there's a deal to be done?
If the money's right, then I'd happily have him back.
Temps?
Recency bias? Are you trying to move in on my LinkedIn?
I've said it twice. I've said it twice this episode, actually, before you joined.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's not coming back. I think Forest are pretty good at welcoming back legends of yesteryear into that lounge, and they have a brilliant thing going with some of the European Cup winners hosting guys. And I've seen all kinds of people there this season, haven't we? From Adeline Guediora to Brie Samba to Lewis Grabban. So I don't read too much into that. I think that's just Forest maintaining that old boys network, and it's great to see that Brees, despite the manner in which he left, is still very welcome at City Ground and he's entertained. So I don't think there's any transfer rumour to be derived from him coming to watch a game of football at a club he did really, really well for.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Just wanted to touch on it really, really quick. People were getting excited about it on Twitter, certainly on Tuesday and Wednesday.
You haven't answered the question though, to be fair.
Me?
Yeah. Would you take him?
Yeah. I would, yeah.
Yeah, France is number 2, massive fan favourite, and I'll never forget that penalty shootout against Sheffield United. I think he's an X Factor player. I would take him. I don't think it's even near the realms of our consideration at this point.
Yeah, the same. What you guys said. Same for me. Just before we quickly move on to the bands, but thank you very much to Home Move Estate Agents as ever for their support, and Ben Sales, who is a season ticket holder. You might bump into him at a game. I saw him wearing his Home Move Estate Agents jacket at a game. So if you spot it, say hello. And if you're looking to buy or sell a house, obviously do look up Home Move Estate Agents. Link is in the description for this episode. And thank you very much for their backing as ever. What's going on here? There. Okay. My momentary panic that the graphic just wouldn't disappear, but it's gone. So we can move on. We will move on. Right. Last week I said we can't really comment on the bans until the FA release their reports, and they have done. So we'll just quickly touch on the bans for Evangelos Marinakis, Nuno and Morgan Gibbs-White. Starting with the Evangelos Marinakis one. He got a 5-game stadium ban for spitting on the floor in the vicinity of officials after the defeat to Fulham. He and Forest's contention was that he had a hacking cough, he likes a cigar, and he was coughing and some phlegm came up and he had no tissues in hand. An independent FA panel featuring randomly a guy who I used to know called Bradley Pritchard, who used to play for Charlton and started off his career at Nuneaton. I covered him. Lovely, mild-mannered guy. He was on the panel. They rejected that contention entirely. and said that he was spitting at the officials, and that's not on. In a 4,000+ word report, saying, not on. Disgusting behaviour, I think was what they said. And he got a 5-game ban. So Forest are appealing, having outlined their reasons. Pete, you've got to go in a couple of minutes. Just give us your vote. You said this was all a bit grim and you just didn't want to talk about it, but give us your thoughts on it quickly.
I'm more than happy for Temps to comment on this if you want. But I don't really know what to say about it. Like that, the report is just an absolutely horrible thing to read. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone who's squeamish about bodily fluids. I'd just really like it if we could be out of the press for a little bit and let our good, brilliant sterling work on the pitch just do the talking from now on. It's just we could do without this sort of distraction.
Go on, Tam. Have you got any thoughts on it?
Look, we've all been there, haven't we? 2 or 3 freshly rolled Cuban cigars, 3, maybe 4 pints of Madri, and you need to expectorate. And who's in the way? A Premier League official, one of life's great quandaries. Look, the words put together by the defence did remind me of that MP character from the Fast Show, not the Fast Show, Little Britain, who apologises at the gates for the ridiculous things he's done, and it is hard to condone. However, I think that the narrative behind this is that these bodies have the ability to show discretion in either way. And I'm not going to comment or describe or defend the charges levelled at Forest, but that there is discretion to go hard or to show some levity. And I think in every case where Forest find themselves before a panel, they go hard. 750,000 quid for a tweet, 5-game ban for spitting, the Nuno and Morgan stuff for the manner in which they've spoken to officials. Of course, that they are breaching rules and that there needs to be sanctions for that. I just feel we're getting clobbered 15, 20, 30% more than others would in a similar situation. And I don't think it helps that there is a bit of a totting up, right? There has been a bit of a flurry of these kinds of things. Feels to me we're harshly treated. And even when sanctions are due, they tend to be at the more severe end when it's Forest involved.
I take all the Temps' points. The only problem with that is that you sort of build a point around precedent and comparisons, but there aren't any because nobody else has sent a tweet like the Forest one, and no one else is gobbing on the floor next to referees. It is just we just need to try not to be involved in these situations, and then we wouldn't have to be kicking off about the sanctions. I just think everything's going so well on the pitch, we could really do without it, and just a period of quiet would be really nice from my perspective.
I think for me, firstly, I don't think owners should be in tunnels. This is a general thing. I don't see why they need to be there, and it creates situations potentially like this. So I don't see why anyone who isn't in part, either an official or in the matchday squad or the media team, need to be in tunnels. So I would say that you can't be spitting on the floor in the direction of refs. I know that the Forest are saying he didn't. If we assume that he did, and the FA are right, then you have to. If this was the owner of another football club, then I'd want the FA to take a stand and ban them. Maybe 5 games is too harsh, but you have to do something. So I don't think we can blindly support or blindly criticise the owner for what he does. So I think take your medicine on this one and move on. On the Morgan and Nuno one, it does seem harsh to me. The tariffs levied against them. In the reports, it said Nuno went to the ref and said, "You're effing us again." You know what the word is. Obviously, I assume it's in reference to the Willy Bolly sending off against Bournemouth. It was the same ref. Nuno went and apologised with his staff afterwards and showed remorse, and still got a 2-game ban plus an extra game for the Everton complaints, which were completely justified as well, because that was that game, and a 55 grand fine. That is steep to me. If he's shown remorse and apologised after the game, Morgan got a 1-game ban and 20 grand fine for calling the 4th official an effing something, 5-word asterisk that you can work out yourselves. I don't know what it is, to be honest. again, that is steep. The FA have set a precedent though this season because Jack Stevens, the Southampton defender, got a 2-game ban for calling Stuart Atwell a 4-letter word that you can work out yourselves. So they're setting a precedent there, and they've set a very high tariff. And I really hope that when, you know, an Arsenal or a Man City or a Liverpool player goes off on one, because you see, you know, Haaland, for example, is an intimidating looking guy. And after the Wolves game where they disallowed that goal, he was in the ref's face. I'm not saying he swore or anything, but if he did, or if someone did of that repute, of that level, then you have to throw the book at them as well now. So that's where I'm at. It feels steep in this instance. And if the FA don't throw the book at people when it happens again, then it does give credence to the narrative that they're out to get Forest. And I do think that people within the FA and the Premier League probably do revel in throwing the book at Forest and giving the maximum tariff, because we probably do piss them off by complaining as much as we do. But you know, try and stay out of trouble as much as you can. As in the Marinakis one, I do think the Nuno and Morgan ones feel harsh, and they've set a benchmark there that's pretty high. Pete, you've got to go because you've got people coming. Do you want to add anything before we let you go?
No, just there's a pleasure to chat all things. I enjoyed our quite lengthy chat about Gibbs-White and the future there, which was fun. And looking forward to the game tomorrow night. Absolutely can't wait to roar the lads home and 3 points, 6 point week.
You off for a cigar, Pete?
and a hock.
Pete, thank you very much for stepping in. You were a hero. I did enjoy the midfield chat more than chatting about bands and anything like that. I'd much rather talk football than all that stuff. But we'll let Pete go, and we'll dot some I's and cross some T's with Temps. Pete Blackburn, thank you very much. Right. Any further thoughts on what I said just there about Nuno and Morgan and what they were done for?
No, it's absolutely fair. But this is a yellow card, which has since been analysed and I think acknowledged by the FA panel as not valid, i.e. good tackle, played the ball. And we're revisiting that scenario, aren't we, of referee indicating such and then taking advice from somewhere. So it does leave a bitter taste, and allowances have to be made for the emotion of sport. And I think everyone playing in the Premier League or Sunday morning football with me and my team, you've got to take a little bit of swearing here and there on the chin. I don't like it. I don't condone it, but it's it happens. And chucking out bans and making people miss games and stay away from the touchline for it. You'd like to think these things can be solved with a contrite apology half an hour after the final whistle when tempers have calmed down, the adrenaline's not flowing quite so hard. So yeah, agree with what you said, mate. Just feels slightly on the harsh side for us. I take Pete's point as well. Of course, you'd like a period of quiet where we're not in the headlines, but we are living on the edge and we're pushing and we're trying to enter this elite club of established groups, and we do have a relatively noisy owner and a passionate players and a passionate manager. So yeah, we for a while now this narrative has been growing, and I'll climb down a bit and back Pete's thing. Let's have a period of time between now and the end of the season when the football does the talking.
I don't even think what Nuno and Morgan said was that bad. I mean, I am conscious refs won't get any better by us hounding refs all the time and driving them out of the game, and just this thing of, well, the refs are crap. They, we can say what we want, or why aren't the refs punished? There is always a factor of human error as well. I mean, no player has a perfect game. We can't expect refs to have a perfect game. But then we get into the whole conflab around VAR and the role of it. But I don't want to just absolutely slaughter refs all the time. And I'm conscious that surrounding them and hounding them like Man United used to do when Roy Keane was playing. You do need to eradicate that from the game. But what Nuno and what Morgan said wasn't that bad, was it? They're not threatening them. Morgan got in his face a little bit, but he'd just been sent off, but wrongly. And I think, like you say, you have to allow some in the emotions of sport. You have to give some area for understanding of that. So, yeah, I think it's harsh to ban them for it. The fines are silly. I'd love to know where these fines go, but it wasn't that bad to ban them, especially Nuno. Like a 3-game ban, he's a pretty mild-mannered bloke, and all we've been on the wrong end of so many bad decisions. So yeah, I feel aggrieved with that one, certainly.
It can strengthen the resolve a little bit. I think if we're looking for a positive, this us against the world mentality that Billy Davies first fostered at Nottingham Forest. I remember speaking to Wes Morgan about it at one particular point. It can create this powerful feeling that everyone's against us, but we're still going to go to Anfield and win, and we're still going to do this, that, and the other. So yeah, we've just got to harness that. But it doesn't help, does it, having key people removed from your match days, be that from the bench or on the field? Just
lastly, quickly on refs, Tony says, I can't remember the standard of refereeing in this country being so poor. I wonder, is that right? Are we thinking, is it one of those things that no matter what era of football we're in, we always think the refs are as bad as they've ever been? Because I think like Michael Oliver's a decent ref. I am struggling to think of too many other really good refs, but VAR also, and the constant analysis of social media, and everyone's a pundit now. It just puts them in so much of a spotlight. I actually wonder if the refs are that much worse than they've previously been, or not. What do you think?
No, they're not. They're fitter. They have more classroom sessions and they're full time for one. They're not doing a day in a classroom, are they? And then officiating at the weekend. So refs are better, but the stakes are higher. The number of camera angles is higher. And we're all kind of, white van man on TalkSport experts all of a sudden, aren't we? As I sit here passing my judgment as a sporting administrator, just ranting on the internet. But the referee we had on Monday night has presided over 5 consecutive victories for Forest. Was he a big part of the game on Monday? No. Did he make it all about him? Did we notice him? No, we didn't. So there are good refs. There are good reffing performances. There have been some really high-profile instances which haven't gone our way, but I do think on the whole the standard and the fitness of referees is better than ever. VAR hasn't been nailed yet and is a massive source of consternation and hasn't removed the debate and the differing opinions on particular incidents. Let's look at the penalty awarded to Jones in the Liverpool-Chelsea game. Looked all the world that he'd made the right decision until 3 minutes of VAR showed that Sanchez could do nothing more to get out the way, and he kind of over-rotated on that fall, and it looked quite spectacular, but it's a perfectly fair challenge. So that debate will always exist. I hope VAR improves, but I will defend the general standard of reffing, which despite this intense debate, I think is because there's more forums for that rather than any kind of blow up in the standard of reffing. I bet I'm getting pelters in the comment.
No, it's a bit 50-50. Oh no,
right, Pat's not happy. Sam's not happy.
Yeah, that's it. Tony did make a good point about European refs. I used to think European refs were rubbish because everything was a foul. We've probably all got that way now. But European VAR and Champions League VAR is much better, much quicker, much more efficient. And I actually think Premier League VAR is terrible for the large part. It takes too long and that needs sweeping improvements. But I do think refs are what they always have been, and we can always say refs have been rubbish. But
bring back Pierluigi Collina, let him ref 10 Premier League games a weekend. He was absolutely flawless, wasn't he?
He was great. Yeah. Well, perhaps if he was refereeing now, though, we'd be sat here dissecting every decision and saying that he was actually rubbish. So yeah, there you go. Right. Any other business? Anything you want to add before we go, Temps?
I'm still promoting Fireworks Night at Trent Bridge. The Saturday's now completely sold out, but Friday the 1st of November, tickets.trentbridge.co.uk.
Excellent. Nothing more from me, just to say that the opposition preview is out first thing tomorrow. So obviously the day of the game, but hopefully you enjoy that. And then we're back tomorrow evening for a post-match show with Mark, and Lewis McGugan is back. He's struggling to do day podcasts now, so we might see him more on post-match shows, which will be really interesting, actually. So looking forward to that. Right. I see our refereeing comments haven't gone down overly well, but that's okay. Anthony Taylor puts a spotlight on it because he's one of our most high-profile refs, and he's made a series of ricks. And the Bournemouth game, he gave out, was it like 14 yellow cards or something mad? So I don't know if it's slanted a little bit because he has had an absolute nightmare for a while now. So yeah, there you go. Right, thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day, and we shall hopefully see you soon.